Hey folks, recently I did a video on how to save money in the garden and I gave a whole bunch of tips. But one thing I wasn't able to do during that video was show you the final results. So here are two items where I'm showing the final results. I decided to take some cuttings from some basil and from some tomato plants, put them in water and root them. Now this has been probably about 10 days, probably about 2 weeks. And this is the results. So here are the results. Both of my basil plants, actually I think I had 3 or 4, but I had them on the deck, and on windy days, a couple of them got blown out completely. This one stayed in the water the entire time. This one got blown out, but I kept putting it back in. The other ones I never even found. So this is the results. So yes, it does work. I'm going to be planting those guys in my main garden. The rest are in my greenhouse. And the reason I'm planting these in the garden is to help protect from bugs. They are very good to help deter bugs because of their scent. The next thing I decided to root was tomato plants. And it's kind of funny because I was out there de-weeding my garden that day and I accidentally cut one of my tomato plants down with a hoe. So I figured, why not? So I took that tomato plant and I took several other cuttings from other tomato plants. And well, enough talk. These are the results. Let's see if I can. Here's one of them. Here's another. Here's another. Here's 2 more. This one didn't do as much, but I think I did this cutting later on. And this here is the big boy, the one that I accidentally cut. Look at that. And you see that? I don't know if you can see that little bloom right there. Little bloom right there. It's ready to flower and form a tomato. Here's 2 or 3 blooms right here. So yes, this does work. Now, I didn't show you all the ones that I'm rooting because I did cut some more and I'm rerooting them now. But these guys here show that it is a successful way to propagate your plants, save yourself a bunch of money, because these tomato plants, I think one plant like this will cost you $5 at one of the big box stores. And if you're lucky, you might find a plant that has 2 plants in it, but still, $5 versus free, please. So what I'm going to do, and honestly, I really don't need all of these tomato plants. And I thought the best thing for me to do would be to pot these. I have plenty of these. So I'm going to repot them, and I'm going to give them away at a local church or some. I'm going to find someone that needs these plants, because since I don't need them, I'm not just doing videos to do videos. I would like for my videos to be helpful to people. So this is my way to give away stuff to the community. It may not be my local garden, well, it won't be my larger YouTube garden community, but this is something I can give to a neighbor. It's something I can give to a family member. It's something I can give to a church, a boys and girls club. I'm going to find some people that need these plants. So for the tomato plants, I'm just going to be using some basic organic soil, and I'm going to add some. I know a lot of people use cow manure, and I do still have some left over, but my favorite has always been chicken manure, but I don't have chickens. So I found a couple places that had it, and it's not the cheapest manure, but let me put it to you this way. In a former life, when I used to build swimming pools, I used to be out there in the country. And whenever I saw someone that had a really great looking garden, I asked them what they used. And to a person, each one said chicken manure. And since I don't have chickens, I was able to find some chicken manure, composted chicken manure, which I'm going to add through the soil. I don't know why I put a glove on when I stuck my other hand in the soil. Mix it up some. Plant number one. Actually, I'm gonna take that lower leaf off because this branch I might even go on and reroot this one. But with this one, with tomato plants, you always want to bury them deep. So I'm replanting these deep. Just a little bit more, just a little bit more. I hope I'm not overdoing it. Of course, I'll add some water to it. But that's really all you need to do. You don't every maybe 3-4 weeks, at least for a while, you might want to add a little 511 fertilizer. You might consider putting basic tomato fertilizer on these plants because they have the nutrients necessary to help produce blooms on the plant, and that's where your tomatoes can come from, the blooms. So don't forget about that. And like I said, it's a very simple process. And since tomatoes are one of the most popular items in most home gardens, it's always great to be able to get some cheap tomato plants. Can't forget my chicken manure fertilizer. One thing I didn't mention, when you're dealing with tomato plants, you can literally plant 2/3 of the plant. So let's say you bought this plant. You could bury up to about here because you would have nothing but roots to down here. And I think that's about halfway. Oh, but something else. I don't like having my leaves down touching the ground. Of course, once the plant grows up some, it will not have the leaves or branches touching the ground. But one thing you have to understand, yeah, I know these are bad. One thing you have to understand, when your leaves are touching the ground, it has a greater chance of getting disease. And that's the worst thing for your plant. One, 2, 3 nice looking tomato plants that I can just give away. Try this at home. It's a great experiment, and also it's a great way to save some money. Now let's go and get those basils planted. Also, before I forget, since you've come this far along, I know it hasn't been that long, but please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit that notification button. That way you can be here next time I'm showing what's going on in the garden. Now let's go and get those basils planted. So, a quick word of advice for people who have dogs. I took a break and went outside to eat. I didn't have my garden fence locked up. This was knocked over, so all the water was out. I found this pepper that was knocked off of a plant, and I had a few empty buckets that I was using to plant the tomatoes. That was knocked over. So, you've probably heard about Bear, one of my dogs. I get a feeling it was him. Fortunately, he really didn't do any other destruction. And I will remember to lock up my garden because, yeah. Anyway, on to the video. So, these are basic sweet basil. They aren't a difficult plant to grow. But there's certain things you might want to consider. Also, certain benefits or certain special things about it that you might actually enjoy. They grow very well with only 4 to 5 hours of sunlight. So if you have a shady area of your garden that doesn't get, 6, 8, 10 hours of direct sunlight, these are great plants for that. But also, they do grow very well in direct sunlight, 8, 10, 12 hours of direct sunlight. Also, they don't need a ton of fertilizer, but when you do fertilize it, you want something that has a higher nitrogen level, because nitrogen is what's going to help produce the leaves. You aren't trying to grow super great roots like a beet, because a beet is a root. You aren't trying to grow flowers, because you want flowers on your tomatoes, because that's going to produce fruit. With these basil, you're only going to use the leaves. So you want something with a high nitrogen content when you fertilize it. So, of course, I'm going for my chicken manure, because chicken manure has great nitrogen content also, and it's higher than cow manure. But also, it's a slower release fertilizer. So once I plant this, I am going to put some fish fertilizer on it, because that first number in fish fertilizer, the 511 in fish fertilizer, that 5 is nitrogen content, and that's what this plant needs. So as far as planting, I have some pretty long roots. I'm going to plant it. First, let me mix this up here. Don't focus on the bald spot. It's just going to get bigger. Yeah, I see you looking. Anyway, so I got that mixed up. I'm going to plant it down to about here. About this spot here. I might take this one leaf here off. I don't know if these are like tomatoes, where tomatoes get a lot of diseases from leaves being directly touching the ground. I might need to research that. But it's a simple planting. Nothing super special about that. Like I said, this is a basic sweet basil, and there are literally a thousand type of basil out there. So depending on where you are, and actually for most people, this is what you're going to find in the big box store. You're going to find 5-10 different varieties. You're probably going to just find one variety of basil. So the instructions or the details I'm giving you now should work with anything. Excuse me. It should work with anything you're going to be planting. Now, something else you want to do with this type of basil is you want to keep up when you're watering. You don't have to keep it soaking wet. It doesn't really need wet feet. But you don't want it to overly dry out. It can dry out a little bit. You know, if you miss a day where it first gets dried out, it should be okay. But you don't want to go 1, 2, 3 weeks without making sure it's watered. So, like I said, it is somewhat drought tolerant, but give it some water. Don't forget about it. And one word about watering: if you let it dry out for too long, it will start to turn to seed or produce flowers. Now, at the end of the season, fine, you might want it to produce flowers so you get seeds. Also, it's great for bringing in pollinators. However, when those flowers show up, the plant is focusing on producing flowers, not leaves. So if you take those flowers off and cut off some of those branches that have flowers, the plant will focus more energy on producing leaves, because that's really what you want during most of the season. And just like most summer variety vegetables, these guys enjoy the heat. They don't do very well once temperatures drop to 50, 40, 30 degrees. However, they might survive the first frost. Now, as far as spacing, generally you want to give about 7, maybe 8 inches between this plant and another plant, whether it be a tomato plant or whether it be another basil plant. The basils are mainly going to focus on growing up. They aren't going to focus so much on growing out. So that's one thing you should consider. You don't have to give it 2 or 3 feet between each plant. It's going to grow up, not so much growing out. So if you follow those simple little tips there, your basil plant should be just fine, and it can do what it needs to do. Produce you with some seasoning, but also give you protection for plants like your tomatoes or your peppers. Great little dual purpose plant. Since this video is somewhat of a follow-up on my video on how to save money in the gardening, this is one of the onions that I planted from an onion ball that I split into about 4 pieces. Growing well, getting taller. I am going to be trellising these tomatoes to kind of get the shade off of this onion, But see, that idea worked. Look at this one here. It was nowhere near that tall. It was only about, it might have been 2 inches tall, but you can see it's growing. And that's the most important thing. I'm getting some good growth out of that one. Not sure what's going on with this one, but from the looks of it, somebody stepped on it. Might have been me, might have been one of the dogs. Here's my garlic. Planting garlic clove here. Main thing, it's been 2 weeks, it's still alive and it's still growing. Not all of them survived, but this one here was super small. It survived, it's still growing. This one here hasn't grown much, but once again, it survived, it's still growing. So just goes to show you that those tips do work. So like I said, this is kind of a follow-up on my previous video, and I will be following up on these plants that I just put down. Tomato plants and the basil plants, and also a lot of the other stuff that I planted. I'm tired, I'm hot, I need to go take a break. So let's get out there and get a little dirty.